It's for AllSports Podcast.
It's pod time.
Oh, you did it.
How's that? That's all right. All right.
Better than
Hi,
last
KJ.
week. Yeah, I like it.
Hi, KJ.
All right, mate. How's it going?
Not bad, thank
Hello,
you.
listeners.
And hello, Joel. How are you?
Hey, Matt. Yeah, all good. How are you, mate?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Now everyone knows what we sound like. KJ, you were described by one listener last week, or the listener last week, as
One listener.
the posher one.
Oh, very good.
I
I brought my corporate voice to the pod, clearly. Yeah.
I take umbrage with that, to be honest.
Okay.
But it wasn't as crisp as James, clearly. But, and Joel had some fantastic insights there as well, so I'll take all the credit.
Yeah, I think your Midlands accent. Do we describe it as Midlands? You want more specificity than that?
Yeah, personally, yeah. It's a Birmingham accent.
Your Birmingham accent. Don't group me in with the
No,
other
because
Midlands
there
accent.
are very different accents around the Midlands. Like you would, obviously, like Nottingham and Coventry is classed as the Midlands, of course. That's their East Midlands. So, and yeah, their accent is very, very different. So, yeah, I feel like you can't have a Midlands accent, really.
So KJ, the posh one. Joel, posh for Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I just talk a lot. I think it's very hard geographically to identify where I'm actually from.
You and James, yeah, you don't really. James, I think you would know he was from, like, that Derby accent is similar.
Derby.
I mean, he's not here, so I can say that it's similar to an Nottingham accent, but I don't think he'd like me saying that.
To a what accent?
His, like, Derby kind of twang is similar to a Nottingham accent. But, yeah,
No, I think you're right.
he wouldn't like me saying that. Good job,
It all blends.
We can't narrow down Joel's accent to, like, what is it? Waddesdon Manor, is it, Joel?
That was long gone, mate. No, I'm back in Birmingham now. So.
Back in Birmingham. All right. A long way from Birmingham. Twickenham Stadium, where I was on Saturday.
Yeah, there we go. So why were you there? I don't know this.
Why was that? Well, I guess it's the origin story of the podcast. So here is the podcast origin story. I decided to have a look at how to get free tickets to sports fixtures, and press accreditation was obviously one. So I looked at how easy it would be to get press accreditation to the rugby, went on the RFU accreditation site, put my details in for the future AllSports podcast, and selected some fixtures I'd like to go to, and the invite started coming in.
Wow.
Check you out.
I can't believe that worked.
Well, yeah.
So all you've got to say is that you've got a podcast and they ask you to go.
Yeah. So my loving wife said in her loving way that I'm a liar. So I've had to make myself not a liar and actually do it. So
yeah, well, I mean, a day out of the house while she's heavily pregnant with the little one as well is, you kind of had to go.
Yeah, so had to do the podcast and had to go. So yeah.
Matt, before you go on, I've got to ask you: is she the one subscriber?
Yeah, who's the person giving feedback?
No, I've played a bit out loud. As you guys know, it's incredibly painful to listen back. No, my dad's given some faithful feedback. I'm sure he will again. So yeah. Say hi to Russell. Thanks.
Hey, Russell. Thanks for the feedback.
Thanks a lot, Russell. I appreciate it.
Said he learnt a lot last week. I don't know if that was any of my fictional stats or if it was anything concrete that we said.
Anyway, we're on a tangent. Tell us about your diet.
Rugby, really easy to do the tangent. You have to keep me honest. So the rugby, yeah, I was a little apprehensive about going because England haven't been playing well, and they've got a team of 15. They've got a squad of 23 that are international class players. There's no one that you don't think that could be could be international class. But they just haven't been performing together. Like the Eddie Jones pre-World Cup, then Steve Borthwick came in, took them through the World Cup, and then after the World Cup said, we're now transitioning. It wasn't like
they did surprisingly well at the World Cup, right? Like they weren't fancied.
It was kind of luck of the draw thing.
Mm.
They didn't really have a challenging fixture until the semi-final. Like all of the teams that they met on the way were teams that they should have beat. They should have got out. Yeah.
Got it.
So the style of rugby that they played at the World Cup, it wasn't particularly enjoyable until they met South Africa in the semi-final. And they turned it on. Like they played with intensity, tried to match the physicality, and it was great to watch. Ended up losing by 1 point. And like in any sport, when it's that close, it can go either way. Best team doesn't always win on the day. But that was the World Cup. Roll on to the Six Nations. They say going through transition. Not a lot of players have moved out. We spoke about it last week about players going to France, Japan. Not a lot of players have moved out. Obviously, the captain has, and that's a big deal. But the main core of players is still very much the same. And so I kind of wondered, what's the transition? And apparently, the transition is the style of play they want to have in both attack and defence. The defence that they're doing is a blitz defence. So it's fast, in your face, shut them down, don't give them much time to play the ball. And it works well, but it can create gaps when you rush up like that.
I guess similar to a high pressing football, right?
Exactly the same. Yeah, it's exactly the same principle, Joel. So they've been doing that and trying to make that work with their new coach that's come in, an Irish guy that had success with South Africa in the last couple of World Cups, a guy called Felix Jones. So he's brought in this blitz defence. And when it works really well. And it's good to see them play like that and shut other teams down. It's just the attack that has really faltered, and they've got such good attacking players and threats. And they've been faltering. And a few weeks ago, Ugo Monya, former England rugby international, he had said about the weight of the England shirt, and I'd actually listed it as a topic to speak about on the pod a few weeks ago. Because I really see it. It's like it's the fear of failure kind of thing that they have. Like they don't want to make any mistakes to the point where they're making a lot of mistakes, and they're just not in that flow state.
It's not like a young team, is it?
Not a young team at all. They've got, Danny Kerr. Danny Kerr hit 100 caps this weekend.
Plenty of experience in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just goes to show, doesn't it, how much pressure they're under, really.
Yeah. So, and they came out in the press conferences subsequently after winning the match this weekend and said, it was Bennell that said in the post-match interview, he said something that is not verbatim, but he said along the lines of like, people have been calling us the worst ever England team, and we just wanted to show them. And that kind of speaks to the siege mentality that they have. When they have a performance like this, where they beat the best team in the world, it's like this: no one likes us, we don't care, we're the underdogs. And it's almost playing with an emotional response. Like that intensity that they've got is playing with emotion. And I just don't know how sustainable that underdog and siege mentality is that you have in camp.
From a non-rugby watcher, like that game was good to watch. Like, I don't watch a lot of rugby, but I can definitely see what you're saying. In there's a lot of like emotion. It felt like a fast game. Felt like you were always on the cusp of something happening. Like, and I don't know, like those last 2 minutes, it felt like they were going to win. Like because where they had the ball, where they had that possession. Yeah, we're like I say, I'm not an avid rugby watcher, but we're standing in the pub and like none of us are rugby fans really, but we were all engrossed. It was like, oh, they're actually going to win it.
Yeah, the momentum in rugby is really apparent. rugby's such a territory game, but the momentum of just not being able to get the ball back and seeing that the team in possession are making gains past every single tackle, always going past the gain line. You see the momentum, you see the defence on the back foot. It's really visible in rugby, and similarly in football, where team attacking can't get the ball off them. They're just cutting through you, like the Cesc Fabregas Arsenal or the David Villa and the Barca team with Xavi and Iniesta. Those passes, they just cut through you, and the momentum's just always with them. Like similar to how it is in momentum with rugby. You just can't stop them attacking. It's just wave after wave of attack. And that was kind of how England were playing on Saturday. And I don't know if it's sustainable. I don't know if this is what they're going to play like forever now. I mean, if they do, absolutely amazing. I just don't know. This felt like a peak, and that like they'll kind of fall off the cliff like they did in the 2019 World Cup. They'd built up to this, like they had this one game in mind, like this semi-final against New Zealand, gave it absolutely everything, and then when they played the final against South Africa the following week, they were just gassed. Yeah.
Matt, I've got to ask you, as our kind of resident rugby expert here, one thing which we'll probably talk about later on in the pod is the kind of changing of tactics that you see within football, whereby there are a lot of managers who kind of think outside the box in terms of their tactical formations. Based on what you said earlier, would I be right in thinking that this is a bit of a departure in terms of these defensive formations and lineups, or is that something which you're seeing more of as the days go on?
What's quite interesting in rugby is because it's a positional game. You're 1 to 15. And you line up in your defence as a defensive line. It's only really there's a few points that you can change the tactic. Amount of men that you commit to a breakdown. So when someone's tackled, that's then the breakdown that the other team can ruck over and compete for the ball. So how many men you commit to that? If you don't commit to that and you just straighten up your line straight away. And get ready for the next phase of play, and then choose your point to attack. Like there are things like that you can change, but really a blitz defense or a drift defense. I mean, like these are all really similar expressions that you have in other sports. Like we spoke about, like in basketball, it's the same. You can like drift, you can man mark, you can zone mark. Fairly similar in rugby. Like you can mark a space, you can defend a space. Like you'd say a winger defends the outside channel on the last man. It's similar to other sports. So I don't think there are big ideology changes. I think it's just getting people to have that ownership of what their defensive role is, as well as their attacking roles or their functional role if it's line out or scrum, and really own it. And commit to defending as a team, not leaving any gaps. And a lot of that is communication.
It feels a lot about like selection is super important, but like culture is super important as well. Like they feel like two big things that a coach needs to get right in order to create a winning team.
Yeah, and this is where you probably see the split in the England side. And maybe it isn't there, but you've got Leicester and Saracens are the traditional core of the England team over the years. And this is going back 25, 30 years as well. Certainly for Leicester. But that's where the clicks are. That you've got groups of Leicester and Saracens players that are the core of the England team. And then and they play in one style that is different to how Northampton Saints and Harlequins play, which is fast attacking rugby. So they'll attack from anywhere on the pitch. If they're on their try line, they'll still play. They'll be flinging the ball wide and they'll be looking to play. They'll be looking to take the space. So like a real counter-attacking kind of mentality. So when you bring in the 15 best players in the country, they're coming from different teams. They come from different styles of rugby. So you bring someone in that plays in a specific style, and the reason why they've been picked is because they stand out for their club, and you bring them in and ask them to play in a different style. And I think that's where some of the breakdown comes from with English rugby, is how do you want them to play? Like, you might as well almost pick a team of all Northampton Saints at the moment, because they're the best club in the country, and then you put a few of the other like world-class, international class players around them to support that core group. But that's the style that you play to, is what style's best. And there's a lot of parallels there with football.
That's international sport, isn't it? Like when you've got club level sport and international sport, and the differences between them. Like, Southgate picks a lot of players from the big clubs, but then England don't play in the same way that they do. So, like, Foden is probably like the most obvious one to call out, where for City it just looks unbelievable. And for England, Southgate's never really been able to find a consistent spot for him. Be interesting to see what happens with that this summer, him in particular.
Is part of that the player's responsibility, though, to be able to be adaptable to a style? Like, that's the kind of player that you want, that can play in different formations, different styles.
And it's about the players around you as well. Like, put all those England players into a team, and it's not the same as having the guys that they have at their club with them. And when that's not the same, they can't be the same. That's how I see it anyway. Like, if you look at, like, Kyle Walker's always been really good for England broadly anyway. But the centre backs that England pick through Southgate's choices or injuries, fitness, whatever, like, they're not as good as the centre halves that Man City have. And for Foden, it's kind of similar. Like, it's probably not so much the case now. Like, he's got Bellingham and like Rice, who are two world-class players. But the tactics that Southgate employs don't really allow Foden like to work in the spaces that he works in for City, and to use the attributes that he has. Like, international football's super different and slow and stuff like that. So all of those are factors as well.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, I feel, right? Because obviously when you're a club manager, you very much have that say over who comes in to the team, what the tactics are like, what it's like from the ground roots, right? I mean, a really good example of this is the way that the Bayer Leverkusen team are playing right now in the Xabi Alonso. So there are many tactical nerds out there who put out YouTube videos about how these guys are breaking down in terms of the tactics and formations, and how they've just had a really stellar season as far as the Bundesliga is concerned. But the interesting thing, we can talk to this later on as well, but the bottom line is that fluidity that we were just talking about earlier, increasingly is becoming more important in football, which is why I asked you the question, Matt, about that fluidity of formation. Because if you look at the probably two managers in the game right now, relatively young managers, but they're taking a lot of the spotlight away from the kind of more senior guys, shall we say. And those two managers right now are probably Simone Inzaghi over at Inter. And you also got Thiago Motta over at Bologna. And what you will see, actually, Inter Milan are playing against Atletico Madrid right now. And there are many different videos that have come out recently. However, if you've been following the game, probably over the last year or so, what you would have spotted is that you see this kind of renaissance of Johan Cruyff's kind of total football in a way, whereby there is this kind of, interchanging of position, no matter where you're playing. If you're playing central mid, you can drop back into defense. If you're a defender, you can go out right or out left. And if you were to do the kind of breakdowns and look at the kind of frame by frame analysis, or any of the kind of replays from previous Inter games, and definitely previous Bologna games as well, what you will see is that everyone is comfortable on the ball. They will absolutely just take responsibility and take ownership over the possession piece. But what you find increasingly now, more so than ever, is that fluidity throughout that 11, to the point where if you take, Thiago Motta, I think he was interviewed recently, and he basically said, like, you almost play like a really strange formation, which is almost like a 2-7-2, I believe, in a way, right? So typically what we do is we think about that pitch in terms of, like, the three horizontals. Now, what Motta said is he kind of actually breaks that down to three verticals instead. So he's got a couple of wingers on the left, a couple of wingers on the right, And then the majority of the play happens through the centre, including, I might add, the goalkeeper. So the goalkeeper is a really inherent part of that formation. Whereas typically, if you look at it, down the years, they've just been the guys who are the shot stoppers, and
So
minimal part.
let me stop you there. So they're now, like, when they're attacking, the goalkeeper moves up the field and is playing as like an 11th outfield player in essence.
No, not so much like that. But basically what happens is that one of the defenders will actually drop back within that penalty area, right? So basically then you've got two that start from the back. Mm-hmm. So then again, owing to the kind of flexibility of the formations that Inter and Bologna will deploy, you basically have that pivot point within the midfield whereby the midfielder can even drop back. And so essentially what you have is a rotation, whether it's amongst defence, midfield and attack. And you as the kind of opposing team in a way, you're not really sure who you should be marking in that respect because, with Inter and Inzaghi, the bottom line is if you look at their tactics now, the more you press them, the more they'll actually just counter you, and not counter you in the traditional style, but actually just full force attack you. So it's a very interesting state, shall we say that?
Flooding forwards.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, exactly. I mean, what they'll do is they'll really kind of look at the wing play and get the ball out onto the wings early, but then more to the point, actually cross in earlier than you would have typically seen in the 90s, in the noughties and so on, right? So, I mean, going back to what Joel was saying earlier, when you're looking at the kind of England team and formation, arguably, as an England fan, anyone would say that the best teams that England put out were the teams of the Beckhams, the Lampards, the Gerrard, Scholes, etc. But historically, you've always seen that issue on the left-hand side for England. Of course, you had Beckham on the right-hand side, but and Beckham could actually vary up between the byline crosses and the earlier crosses that he'd put into someone like an Alan Shearer, for example. But really fascinating state of play right now as far as the Italian teams are concerned, seeing a bit of a Italian renaissance there.
Is that like, so the Moneyball principle, you kind of bring in players for that system. They don't necessarily have to be the world's best players, but they fit in the system, and that's how you're going to get the win.
It's a bit like that.
Yeah,
I'd say it's like attributes driven. A lot of it is attributes driven now. Like, does this player have certain attributes, and can he come in and learn this system that we're playing? Like, a lot of that with City and Guardiola. Like, how often do they sign good players who struggle for their first year, 18 months there, but then suddenly it clicks and they get it? Kind of happened with Mahrez and happened with Grealish to an extent, and like he's kind of fallen back into a slightly more peripheral role now as well. Stones is a bit like that as well. I feel like they go looking for attributes, and they pair up attributes with like personality a lot of the time, and then figure out, okay, where do they fit in the system?
So similarly, then going back to rugby, it's quite similar for the centre partnership. So the centre partnership for England is one of the biggest challenges, because you've got a 12 and a 13, an inside and an outside centre. Traditionally, the inside centre will be a larger ball carrying player, and the 13 will be faster, more of a distributor. And the England ethos under Eddie Jones was kind of to get your best players on the pitch. So there'd be more utility players that can play in many different positions, but they're excellent players. And that's why Owen Farrell, at number 10, was playing at 12, because he just wanted him on the pitch. And then, like, they're kind of trying to find a formation now that works. They're trying to find a centre partnership that does work, and they've got two absolutely formidable players with Ollie Lawrence and Henry Slade. So Ollie Lawrence plays at number 12, bit more of a robust runner, although he's lightning as well. And then Henry Slade, who's just an amazing distributor. So they're kind of going through that now. So it's going back now, just looping it back to the transition. Finding those formations, similarly to what you've talked about in the football there, it's kind of what they're doing. Like, that's the transition that they're going through. A good time to do it straight after a World Cup, and then you set yourself up for success with the 4-year cycle. There'll be players that come in and out that don't fit. Like, that attribute point you were talking about, Bill, is really interesting, because that's probably what it is that you need to have more so with rugby union, because of the specificity of the 1 to 15 roles that you've got, from scrummaging through to the back line. For the England Ireland, they played amazing. Can they keep doing it? Don't know. Might have just been on emotion, but I'll just take the win. I'll take the win, being what arguably the world's best team at the moment. But it was at home. Big emotional day. It could be a one-off, or it could be the start of something special. I think there looked like there were building blocks in there that were really promising. A little further south on the continent, Italy were playing at home to Scotland. Italy having drawn against France. Now, France, in their home World Cup last year, were one of the favourites.
They drew. That's not very.
It's not very rugby.
No.
They drew because
they all added up to the same.
Yeah. So Italy scored a try. Italy scored a try right at the end of the game, and then Paolo Garbisi sets up the kick, and he's doing his pre-kick routine and goes to approach the ball, and the ball falls off the tee. Now you've only got 60 seconds to take it. Goes to put the ball back on the tee, but the players are allowed to charge down a conversion, so they've obviously come out. Time's up. They've cleared it away, and then he was allowed to reset it in time, but had to rush it and subsequently missed the kick. So they drew. But Italy should have beaten France, which is just insane. France playing terribly, but France playing terribly should usually steamroll Italy. So Italy drew, and then they beat Scotland. So they had a very similar match to their France game last week, and they beat Scotland this week. So, and Garbisi as well got the winning kick. So 31-29 it was against Scotland. So people spoke about Italy not being good enough to play in the Six Nations, and last week kind of proved that they can compete, and then this week really cemented it, beating Scotland, getting the full points against them. And next week they now play against Wales to see who gets the wooden spoon. So who's going to come last? Will it be Wales or Italy? So going into the last weekend of the Six Nations now, there's a lot of jeopardy in a lot of the games. Ireland should win it because their points difference is so big. England could mathematically win, but they won't. The points difference is too big. But England going to France next weekend, so that will be a good test of how this team has developed, and is this like the new transition, those building blocks, are they there, or was it just a one-off emotional performance? So we'll see. We'll catch back up on it next week.
Nice. Matt, I've got to
rugby
ask,
roundup done.
Any kind of positions there that have been deprecated in rugby as the years and decades have gone by? So, for example, in football, you've got the kind of death of the number 10, right? Even more so now, you're seeing the kind of classical number 9s kind of die out somewhat. More so from the point of fluidity. You could argue that someone like Pep Guardiola has really been the catalyst behind that. So, open question to you as to where the same has happened in rugby, really.
I probably see it the most in the change of rugby from amateur to professional sport. So what you've seen is an increase in skill set, which has meant that you don't just have a forward pack that are big, lumpy guys that can't throw the ball. Their handling skills have improved, so they can offload, they can take a tackle, and offload what you'd call an out the back door pass. They've got some pace too. So I think you've got more roles now. So it's not that any have been kind of reduced or deprecated, as you said. It's actually that more have emerged because rugby's now it's been professional for almost 30 years now. So very, very young as a professional sport, really. And it's that maturing that it's going through where you see those skill sets and the definition of the roles on the pitch improve and be further defined. So like a jackling position is someone that at the breakdown for the ruck is competing to get a turnover and take the ball back from the attacking side. like that role has only really emerged properly over the last 10 years. There were some players that did it before, but now it's a very specific type of player. They're usually a little shorter, very, very strong in the core, great mobility to get down and balance, because you're not allowed to have any other points of contact on the floor but your feet and your hands on the ball on the floor, because you're off your feet and you can't compete at the breakdown if that's the case. So those sort of roles, like the jackler, who are in the pack in the 1 to 8, those sort of roles have emerged more. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the next evolution of the rugby playing role is. But yeah, certainly haven't seen any that have kind of reduced in their value to the team.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've got to say rest in peace for number 10 as far as football's concerned for the time being, but wanted to throw out a question out there as to who we think the best number 10 of all time would be in football terms. I mean, I was wearing a number 10 shirt last week, so maybe my vote goes to a certain Roberto Baggio, but obviously there are plenty out there, so I wanted to get your takes on it.
I liked Totti.
Oh, fantastic player.
Yeah.
The King of Rome.
Classic, like, throwback player who didn't, like, physically stand out, but, yeah, like one of those real 90s, noughties Serie A players who, yeah, wasn't particularly quick or particularly strong, but just had the technical ability to do whatever he wanted with the ball. Yeah, always like watching him.
Yeah, I think someone else with the technical ability and certainly the vision was always vilified as lazy, but actually he was just so efficient, was Mesut Ozil. Loved watching Ozil play. He'd just float across the pitch, and like he was still running at pace, but just so effortless in what he did, and the passes that he'd pick out. Probably Ozil. Bergkamp wore a number 10 as well, but he wasn't your traditional number 10. Like a number 10, I would say, is the here to create player.
Yeah, they call it the La Fantasista in Italy, right? So that player that obviously allows that kind of creativity, but as you mentioned, like can be a bit lazy at times and isn't necessarily encouraged to track back. Whereas I feel like now you've got, if you look at De Bruyne within the City team, very much kind of occupies that role, but still very much kind of plays between the lines and will absolutely track back to collect the ball and play those passes.
He's like a 6, an 8, and a 10, isn't he? Like, there's a few players like that. Who like do all those jobs somehow. Yeah, I don't really know. They're so fit these days, and they get up and down the pitch so much. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, Michael Owen did raise an interesting point in a YouTube video I saw recently about the caliber of football now, and those players more to the point. Like, I think you mentioned that basically now you just got to be a great athlete. If you can run, you're basically guaranteed a position in the starting 11. Whereas obviously the era that he played in, he maintains that it was more of the kind of baller era, if you want to call it that, where you had the people like the kind of Riquelmes and so on playing for Argentina, and they had their own specialist mercurial skill set. So yeah, interesting take either way.
Riquelme played with some brawlers as well.
He did indeed, yeah. I mean, defending back in the day, right, whether it was for your team or for the opposition team, they did not go lightly on you, right? I mean, they could have encouraged quite a few injuries for the likes of Maradona and Ronaldo back in the day.
They were made of tougher stuff back then. Maradona, watching Maradona dribble through players and he's just getting kicked. Yeah, absolutely. Right, I want to pay homage to the fact that you're wearing an India cricket shirt, KJ. So we're going to come back to it. But while we're speaking about football, let's continue on the football chat, and then we'll close off with the India-England series wrap up. But let's do a Premier League roundup.
Yeah, I mean, big game at the top of the table, obviously, on Sunday afternoon. It's been billed as like the highest quality game anybody's ever watched. Like
is this Villa Spurs?
No, unfortunately not. Liverpool City. We'll come back to that maybe. But yeah, Liverpool City, played at an insane pace. and so much quality on show. But then the margins are still there. Like Diaz has, I think it's 2 or 3 really good chances, and just can't take them. So for all the quality on show, there were still moments where they fell the wrong side of those margins. But 2 really good sides going at it. I think a draw is a perfect result really for the title race. It keeps both of them in it, both of their momentum going, and for Arsenal to nick that win against Brentford the evening before as well. I think it's going to be it's City Arsenal next. After
in 18 days, I think. So we've got FA Cup, international break. So I sat on the train with the guy coming back north, not too far north, but north enough. And he had been at the Arsenal, and he said it was either going to be a draw or an Arsenal win, because Brentford just weren't going to take a chance on a heavy loss. Arsenal have been putting 5 or 6 on everyone.
Goals,
So they decided to shut up shop. So it was just wave after wave of Arsenal attack, but they weren't really penetrating into the final third, he said.
I didn't think they were going to score.
No.
And it felt like the goal came out of nowhere as well. Just all of a sudden, Havertz had just nodded it in. I agree with that they were really struggling to
break them down.
Chances and break them down.
They're the sort of wins, they're the wins that you need to have
100%.
if you're going to win the league. You've got to win ugly. And I don't know, Arsenal couldn't do that. We spoke about it last week. Arsenal falling away at the title challenge last year. They've not done the winning ugly, really. I didn't know if Arteta's team could do it, but it looks like they are. Yeah, KJ, so you mentioned earlier about the managers. So how many, Klopp's obviously a great manager. I don't know that he plays. They say that everyone's team now plays the Guardiola way. Arteta's team certainly plays the Guardiola way. His coaching education was from Guardiola, so makes sense. Klopp's not though, right?
No.
He goes with the kind of gegenpress approach, right, in terms of the counter-attack, or at least he would have done. I think. Yeah,
you're going to need to explain gegenpress to anyone that doesn't speak German or know enough about football like me.
Ultimately, it's just exactly what we mentioned earlier, like a high press, right, such that you win the ball back in the last third. So basically, when the other team is defending there, you're really pressing them and really trying to put as much pressure on the ball as you can. So again, you need the right caliber of player to do that, as we talked about earlier. You need those pacey players, obviously the kind of Salahs that you had. You had Mane back in the day for Liverpool as well, played up front with Firmino. But again, the way that the managers are bringing about their own kind of evolution of styles in a way is really fascinating to see. And I think the thing that we touched upon earlier is when you're talking about the cities of this world and Liverpool's of this world, Arsenal, etc. You could see, especially even with the City goal, right, that was something that kind of came right off the training ground there. And you take the player who is most fit for purpose in that respect, in terms of a De Bruyne and his ability to deliver the ball like that and whip that ball in from that corner flag at that pace and make sure it does not go out, such that Stones can get that tap in, is quite a work of art if you think about it. But I mean, going back to the whole Arteta thing, there was an interesting incident that happened in the game yesterday, which I want to touch upon briefly, because it was, some would say...
Which game was yesterday?
Yeah, this was Arsenal-Porto that we're talking about here, right? So basically, obviously, we know that went to penalties, but in the incident that happened thereafter, Porto manager Sergio Conceição effectively said that Arteta had some very choice words for Conceição's family, which some would argue is very much in keeping with Arteta's style. So
when he said family, was he referring to the club and my staff and my family? No, he wasn't. Okay, right.
But this guy has previous for accusing opposing managers of insulting his family. So
is his family very insultable, or is he fictitious?
What he said about what Arteta said is that the person that he insulted is no longer with them. That's as much as we know. Arteta has said no comment, and obviously, but yeah, he
I'd
has.
comment. If I haven't said it, I'm coming out and I'm denying it.
I don't know. I feel like either way, you don't want to keep whipping up the storm.
Yeah.
Anyway, Arteta doesn't care because he's won. So
yeah,
that he doesn't need to get involved in that stuff because they're through.
Another ugly win.
Well, exactly. Yeah, they're getting the job done at the moment.
Or an ugly draw and then penalties.
Well, I'll tell you who whipped up a storm and who didn't win. Interestingly enough, Lecce versus Verona.
Okay, can I just say, I've segued really nicely into my penalties quiz, and you've boycotted it with Lecce. But go on, do Lecce. And
let's see the quick shot. I think we're all looking forward to that, including all listeners of the pod, right? So, interesting enough, like the manager there, D'Aversa, gets into a bit of a scuffle, to put it mildly, and ultimately headbutts one of the opposing team players, a certain Thomas Henry. And I heard on another podcast, whose name we shall not bring up here, that this Thomas Henry actually has more goals within Serie A than a Mr. Thierry Henry. So, interesting little stat there. But D'Aversa was promptly sacked by Lecce, I think, the next day. So clearly a no-nonsense approach going on there.
Yeah.
Goodness me.
Yeah. But it did bring about some interesting discussions online as to whether Zinedine Zidane would be the next Lecce manager or not.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, I think I'd probably be a fairly abrasive manager. Passionate. But yeah, you're at your job. At the end of the day, you're at your job, and there's a level of professionalism that you need to bring.
No headbutting opposition players. I feel like that's like rule number one.
And that's something I try to
Not always successful.
try to live by at work as well in the office. But sometimes people just leave the fridge open, and that beep is annoying. Do you remember that, Joel?
I do, vividly, yeah.
Right.
An incredible game happening in the Premier League at the moment. Luton were 3-0 up, and Bournemouth have pulled it back to 3-3 in 15 minutes. So, yeah, that's going on.
Is Solanke on the score sheet there?
Solanke did score, got one. Okay. Go on, do your quiz, man.
Solanke. Well, my fantasy team, forgetting to do fantasy changes. Thank goodness I already had Solanke. But I would have flooded my team with Luton and Bournemouth players, knowing that it will be a goal fest with Luton, as we spoke about last week. Come on, Luton. What would this result do to the table?
I don't know. So a draw, as it stands, has them
Luton need a win. Bournemouth
remaining in the relegation places. So after this game, they'll have played the same amount of games as everyone that they're chasing and being chased by, although there's not really a lot of chasing going on behind them. And yet 2 points behind Forest, 3 points behind Everton, 4 points behind Brentford, 5 points behind Palace. That's probably as high as it goes. I mean, Palace will be fine, won't they?
Yeah.
And I feel like Brentford will probably be fine as well. But Everton and Forest are going to... If Luton win tonight, those two will be sweating.
Yeah. Fight for a Luton win. All right. So, I don't know why I was looking at penalty stats the other week, but I was looking at penalty stats. And very interesting. So, penalty success rate in European football leagues. What league do you think has got the highest success rate of goals?
What, any league?
Yeah, so obviously Premier League, Primera, Bundesliga, Serie A, La Liga, is French one Ligue 1? Ligue 1. Yeah. Go for it.
Any league. Wow.
I'm going to say, it's completely stereotypical, but I'm going to say Bundesliga.
I'm going to go with Ligue 1.
It is a Ligue 1.
Is it really?
Go on, the French. Yeah, it is 86.4% conversion rate. Bundesliga second, not far away, 83.3. Then you've got the Premier League at 80.4. La Liga, interestingly, right down the bottom, 73.2% conversion rate.
Really?
Wow.
Low. A lot of misses.
Yeah.
Is it because they are placing the ball or powering the ball? So, power of shot, 50% or 100%. Which one has a higher conversion? 50% power, 100% power. So, a place or a power shot.
I've got to go place. Surely.
Oh, really? I'd go the other way. Power.
A bit of reverse psychology going on here.
You'll be right. It is power. So, only 47% of placed penalties score. That's mental. 53% are saved, missed or saved.
Yeah.
So power, only 7% are saved, 31% are missed, and 63% are scored.
Yeah.
And then the highest ratio is 75% power. 75% power has an 81% score rate.
It's all about balance.
Yeah, it is. Aim somewhere and hit it fairly hard.
Hit it hard there, yeah.
Hit it hard. It was quite interesting to see both of the goalkeepers. Sat down studying their notes pre-kickoff yesterday.
Oh, what? So in between.
Yeah. At the end of extra time,
they're both like going over sheets of paper,
yeah,
or whatever, iPads, whatever.
Yeah, crazy.
Really, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, they really
didn't work for the Porto fella, did it? He was like basically see-through.
That's it. Yeah. So conversion rate, players pretty much of all time, of mainly top leagues. Who's got the highest conversion rate?
Are we talking current players here?
No.
Latisse is up
there. He is 98%.
Wow.
49 penalties scored and only one missed.
One missed, isn't it? Yeah.
There's another player in the there's two other players in the 90s. Another one.
Is the other one the West Ham fella?
No.
I'm thinking of Julian Dix, but maybe it didn't.
My Play Today blog, as a reference for statistics, probably shouldn't be taken as 100% fact, but probably like 95% fact. Alan Shearer, 93.5%, 72 penalties. So 72 penalties scored, only 5 missed. That's pretty reliable. He'd be in your
don't recall him
now.
placing the ball anyway. It was all power.
Well, I feel like he perfected the 75%.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, Latisse was 100% like in your head placer.
Yeah, I think he was, wasn't he? Like
he was like down the middle,
just
regularly down the middle. Yeah. Marco van Basten also in the 90s, 51 scored, 4 missed. Interestingly, big C-Ron, 144 penalties scored, 29 missed, 83.2%. Amazing from Cristiano Ronaldo.
Yeah, for that volume. I feel like Messi's got a fairly bad penalty. Well, I say bad. It's like, I think it's still like 80%, but...
Yeah, I mean the mind boggles.
Well, he's not as bad as this guy, who tops the active player list for worst penalties out of 20 or more penalties.
Oh, I want to say
it's Edin Dzeko. Not going to guess it. It's Edin Dzeko.
Well,
9 missed out of 20.
Aguero was going to be my guess. Tied together, but yeah.
I think that'll do, won't it? That was quite interesting, though. Relatively interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, this is why I said to you guys last night, Arsenal winning, because the team who start taking penalty shots is 61% more likely to win.
Yeah. That's That's something that came out. Not that. Like, obviously, all this data in football has been. It's gone through a bit of a revolution, hasn't it? And it's like clubs and teams are accessing way more data. And I feel like in the period that Southgate has been England manager, I don't know exactly how long that is now. Maybe 8 to 10 years, something like that. In that period, they've done a lot of not just kind of like psychological side of taking penalties, but also just like where are the gains from in terms of should we be taking first, should we be taking second, those kinds of tactics and things like that as well.
Yeah, I think they moved on from the psychological side of when Glenn Hoddle was in charge and decided to bring along quite a few interesting people into the fray, shall we say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cricket.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, talking about Glenn Hoddle, you've kind of that's bookended. That's bookended the football chat. There's probably more football chat we could have had, but we've kind of interspersed it through the others. But yeah, cricket then.
Where do we start?
Well, I think we probably start at the end at the most beautiful cricket, one of the most beautiful cricket grounds in the world. Describe Dharamshala, KJ.
I can't say I've ever been there, but from what I did see of the aerial shots and everything that I saw on Sky Sports, incredible, right? So, I mean, the very fact that you're up 3-1 and you're going for a 4-1 victory. India up 3-1. Yeah, absolutely. So, why would it be England, right? after that first test in Hyderabad, I think that it really kind of stoked the fires as far as Rahul Dravid and the team were concerned, right? Because playing in your home country, I think it's something along the lines like 17 consecutive series wins now on home soil. You're looking at that and thinking, well, the Indian team effectively need to wake up, and they very much kind of came into the fray from Test 2 onwards with you could pretty much call it a second string team, right, in terms of especially the middle order there. But I think as the Test series went along, what you did see is the spinners came to the party, right, in the form of the people like Kuldeep Yadav, Ravi Ashwin for sure, and it posed an interesting kind of conundrum, if you want to kind of call it that. I think Nasser and Athers kind of hit the nail on the head when they called it a bit of a kind of arm wrestling contest, right? Especially over that kind of 5 test period, where they mentioned that over a 2 or 3 test period, you can kind of just scratch it off if you're a Ben Duckett or someone like that who might have had the odd untimely innings, shall we say? But over that kind of course of 5 tests, it's pretty much a battle of attrition. And so, you saw that, very much with the Dharamshala test in the end, where, let's face it, it was a bit of kind of one-way contest. And I think England were kind of running out of ideas, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think being a touring team in India and the domination that India have had at home, and they are the number 1 team in the world for a reason, and will continue to be there or thereabouts for a very long time. Looking at the youth players that are coming through, there's just a constant stream of world-class players that come out. And it seems to be mainly now coming through the IPL and then going into the test side, which is great to see. So it means when the IPL's on very, very soon, that you're kind of on the lookout for these young Indian players. You're not seeing it so much with the other countries that are playing in the IPL. They're established internationals that play in ODIs and T20s. For England, I'd say Harry Brook, although he's just pulled out because his grandma just passed away. But Harry Brook, for example, he'd become more established in the English more than counter game. He was starting to tee off for England T20 when he got picked for IPL. You don't see young ones coming through from other countries. It's just India. So yeah, that player stream that they've got is incredible within England though. So they continue to pursue the Bazball. And I think the narrative, actually, that Ben Stokes, the captain, and Baz McCullum have got in talking about now transitioning, the end of the beginning of Bazball and how they now evolve the next phase of English cricket it's really interesting to talk about it like that. You hear it in other sports. They're like, this is the project. Like, this is the plan. Like, we're in a 3-year project, and this is year 0 or this is year 1. And that's kind of, it's like the mentality that they've got. They've given the players the freedom then to play and saying, like, we're evolving. So what happens? Like, it's not just a straight line where we're going to win home series, then we're going to win an away series. We'll probably lose an away series, and then maybe we'll lose a home series at some point.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? I mean, McCullum is halfway through his contract.
Yeah.
And so, we obviously still the winning record intact there. I think they lost 8 over his tenure. So, I mean, there's plenty of room there for a future with Bazball, as you mentioned, like how that kind of evolves into its next iteration, whether or not you kind of find more players who come onto the scene as far as England are concerned, in a vein similar to what you're seeing with India, where you've got the likes of Jaiswal kind of coming along from the IPL scene. Begs the question as to, if you take the other kind of shorter formats of the game, the 20-over game, for example, and if you apply that within a kind of England setting, who's kind of really kind of coming through there to really kind of state their place in the Test side.
But with players like him, on form, obviously, but just pure class, you can tell someone that's just a classy cricketer, doesn't have many faults in their game for such a young age. England just couldn't get him out. He got himself out, mostly. But he scored like nearly 300 runs, more than the next person on the top run scorer list in a 5-game series. Absolutely wild. Yeah. And it wasn't that he just got one big score, because he got many big scores, and he didn't just then get starts. He went on and was posting 50s. When he wasn't scoring hundreds, he was posting 50s. Absolutely insane. So players like that, England have got so far to go to catch up India to the point where they could actually compete in India. The spinners that England have got, and Hartley, like, shout out to Hartley, did great. But yeah, he's no Ashwin.
Yeah, it was interesting to see, both him and Bashir come to the scene, right, and really try to kind of, again, state their places within the England side. But yeah, I mean, like with Jaiswal, rightfully so, I think, in terms of player of the series, right? Pretty much took apart Bashir, when Bashir came on to bowl in that 5th Test. So, yeah, onwards and upwards. And I think for him, obviously, he will have a crucial role to play within the IPL. I think he's at Rajasthan Royals, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean, like, you then begin to look at the other countries there, and SA20 is kind of one which I've been watching recently as well. And just trying to see, if you do have those kind of domestic players, shall we say, coming through and being the fresh blood. But there, you look at it as a kind of feeder, I guess, right now for the way the tests are going. And if you can play within that kind of shorter format, which, let's face it, as per the kind of generational requirements now, where maybe the attention spans are a bit lesser and they're not really prone to those kind of 5-day tests in a way. You can see that there is a place for that there in terms of really bringing players into the Test squads.
Excellent. Nice place to wrap. I would just say, actually, if it wasn't for Ollie Pope, and you always have one player that does something in a game, if it wasn't for Ollie Pope's one innings, then it would have been a whitewash. And then how does that actually look? So if England haven't won any of the matches, how does it actually look coming home, having lost 5 games? Probably honourable mention as well to Jimmy getting his 700th wicket at not 39 years old, but at 41 years old. So,
I felt 41, and he did say recently that he feels at his best right now, right? I mean, historically.
I'd be saying that too. If I was 41 and I was still getting picked for England, I would be also saying the same thing. Also, to correct last week, quarters in NBA are 12 minutes. Having listened back and listened to someone say 15 minutes and me say, yep, no, it's not. It's 12 minutes quarter. And we did jinx the Celtics, and they then lost 2 games on the bounce. They've now subsequently won 4 games on the bounce. So
They
this
played
time
6 games since the last time we recorded.
I know, isn't that mental? Isn't that mental? 8 days. Absolutely crazy. Yeah. All right. I think that will do from us. If you've got anything to say and you want to get in touch, reach out to us at allsportspods@gmail.com or send me a WhatsApp, Dad. And I think that'll do it for tonight. Thanks, KJ.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, listeners.
Cheers, Joel.
Cheers, guys.
All right. Catch you on the next one.
Cheers.